So yes, we are definitely all capable of that mindset. And mindset is everything. I'm definitely driven now, but I think it's from within and it's personal. It's not about proving myself or receiving any accolades. Keep pushing into the stretch zone, because that's where the energy, motivation, focus, connecting with ourselves and others, all that lovely juicy stuff happens. Yeah, as well as a little bit of anxiety and fear and feeling a bit sick or worried or nervous. Yeah, fine, that's life, bring it on. And it was how rich we were in life rather than in money. And for me, success is being present. In the positive psychology world, we're talking less these days about the meaning of life or the purpose of life and more about what matters. Got hundreds of Ukrainians, and if you make eye contact with them all, you are crying all day. We went and served pizza in a little wooded village that had been occupied. So the Russians had come in, and then they set up a kind of sniper on the crossroads of the village. And the local school teacher, female, got shot at this crossroads and nobody could get her. I still choose to go there. It's dangerous and it's hard. I choose to go to South Pole. I choose to go sailing around the world, even though I've never sailed before. Because, my life has been quite easy and we are privileged and we are lucky and all that. But I choose to make it harder and tougher because I know it's good for me. I'm really happy with my life. I've got a lovely balance. I think I've got a good perspective. And I know that I enjoy doing adventures. I know that it's good for me.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My guest this week, wow. From skiing to the South Pole to yacht racing around the world, my guest has learned to develop the mindset to thrive and perform in the toughest of conditions. She draws on her extreme adventuring experience, business acumen and masters in positive psychology to help individuals and organisations survive and thrive in challenging conditions. She is the Adventure Psychologist. I'm delighted to welcome the wonderful Paula Reid.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling quite feisty today, so watch out.
Amazing. Let's have it. It's going to be great. Look, we obviously talked just off air about when we done the event together, and we spoke for about 15 minutes in front of an audience, and literally felt like we just scratched the surface. So I was so grateful for you obviously agreeing to come on and delve a little bit deeper.
Yeah, we'll dive in, go for an underwater swim into the content. We were talking about swimming as well this morning, weren't we?
We have. Well, look, as always, we're just going to kick things off with people's stories. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me something about life growing up that shaped who sits in front of me today.
Okay, so I won't start at the very beginning, but I grew up in Sussex, West Sussex, and I think a lot of my joyous memories are exploring. So I'm quite old, and in those days back then, we were allowed to go out and play and didn't have quite so much caution about where we were and how long we'd been out as we do perhaps these days. But I had a fantastic childhood. Both my parents were just supportive and loving, but not too restrictive and not too loose with our upbringing. But I do remember just going outside to play. So making camps, exploring sort of deserted old buildings that had been left and making up all the ghost stories about those, climbing trees, of course, falling over and getting stung by stinging nettles and torn by brambles, being muddy, outdoorsy, playing, just enjoying the nature and the sort of joyful, just free play. And then cycling. I remember cycling a lot too as a kid, so cycling everywhere. It was near Gatwick's. We used to go and watch the planes, go and cling to the wire fence and watch the flying carrot, I think one of them was, the big orange plane. So cycling and playing outside. That for me is like a massive memory, and I think was part of a happy childhood. I don't know how much it actually formed what I do now, but I still love to be outside and to explore and enjoy nature. And
do you think like kids have lost that a little bit these days, just with computers and online and streaming everything that goes with that, social media, whatever we want to put it to, but just and maybe to do with society as well, that we're, like you said, there's, I was the same, like we'd go out at 9 o'clock in the morning in the summer, play football all day and be outside and come home when it starts to get dark, right? And that, I wouldn't let my kids do that now, and you sort of think, maybe.
I'd let my kids do that. I think we need that freedom to play again, and an amount of suffering and struggling because we've lost that too. So it's not just the tech. I understand it's a bit hedonistic though, the tech, it's a quick fix. It's like you're a user. You are a user on tech, right? That's what they call us. So you get sort of addicted to the ticks and the who's and the thumbs up. So I can understand a bit of technology. Of course, it connects us. It gives people some education, even all sorts of positives with tech. But there's something about lifting the head up and physically moving, and obviously fresh air and the nature's gym of being outside. And there's so much evidence against being on tech too much and for being outside. Green therapy, blue therapy, fresh air, exercise, of course. So somehow we need to redress the balance, because I do think that it's not doing the later generations much good mentally to have their head buried in social media.
No, I agree. And I think even down to actually the levels of communication skills that you develop by just being outside, being in that type of environment, being with mates in a park or whatever that looks like, and being able to communicate. Like, how many times and you've seen so many pictures even online where, a group of kids sitting there all sitting on their phone and messing up, just be able to communicate, have a conversation. I think for me, like growing up and having that as a skill set, I've built businesses that are based on that, just being able to communicate and have a chat with people and build relationships by communicating. I think it's such a big skill that maybe gets lost a little bit at the moment.
Do you think we're sounding old-fashioned?
I think we're sounding a little bit.
That's my worry. But that's why I say it needs to be that balance back, hasn't it? I mean, yes, genuine, proper conversations very rarely happen these days. I think we're having one right now, which is fantastic. We're physically looking at each other. I'm looking into your eyes, and our souls and our hearts are touching, but we're having a proper conversation with no distractions, which is a different depth and quality, isn't it? And you're right, we've lost the art of conversation, I think, but also we have to somehow involve technology and chatbot and AI so that we get the best of both worlds, and it's a blended future, without us sounding like a couple of old-fashioned fogies. But I agree, being outside and having good conversations are deeply meaningful compared to perhaps some of the superficial nattering and twittering going on with social. But somehow there's got to be a good balance between the two, because we are going that way. We need to embrace it, but we need to get the balance back, don't we?
100%. And I use it all the time, social media. I'm on there all the time. Of course, I use it for business. It's an amazing thing. But but I guess one of the reasons I love this so much is because I am able to just go, I'm just going to switch off and actually just be right in this moment and have this conversation and be there. And there's something like talk about ikigai and finding your purpose or what you're trying to do. This for me is a happy place, right? Sitting here and having them connections that you do, and I've found that with every conversation I have, I think which is quite special. And like you said, I don't think we need to embrace that as much as we do the other. Balance is key.
And evolution is inevitable. So we are heading towards a more technical world and we can't avoid, for instance, AI, I don't think.
What are your thoughts on AI?
Pragmatic, I'd like to say, because I can completely appreciate lots of people's fear and anxiety around it. And to a certain extent, I have it too. But I do think it's an inevitable part of our evolution, and it was kind of always going to happen. We were heading more and more that way. So it's about harnessing it, embracing it, using it for the best, to enhance the human condition and the planet, rather than going down the route of Terminator, Matrix and Mad Max.
If it gets in the wrong hands, let's hope Skynet and all that. Let's hope that we don't go down that route. Well, talk to me then a bit, like, just with your child. What was your, like, as a child or growing up? What was your ambitions? What were your dreams? What did you want to do when you?
So I think this is quite interesting. That I think there's something about labelling and self-fulfilling prophecy and all that. I don't think there were any expectations of me, through me or through others when I was growing up. I think I lived, as I said, I live in Sussex. I had a fairly straightforward family life. No dramas or disasters or intriguing relatives or anything going on. Just like, plodding along as you do. Which is interesting, isn't it? Because one, I think you can get stuck in a rut and toe the line and be normal. And two, there were no expectations. There was no ambition or vision or craziness at all. That will happen later. So I think that's an interesting point, though. That I was in danger of getting swallowed up in the normality of everyday world, as lots of people are. Go to school, stay on a couple of years perhaps to do your A-levels, think about going to university. A lot of people do. Get a job, get married, have children and a dog, and so on. So there were no expectations. Just a happily pleasant life. Felt pretty safe and comfortable, so that's all good. But there was no stimulus until I was about 15 or 16, and I did rebel a bit at school. I did smoke and skive and stuff, and I think that was a little bit of the spirit of me trying to get out.
Okay. And then so can you, going back, can you pinpoint a time where you was like, I want to, talking about adventures and stuff like that, I guess, but where you went, I'm going to go and explore the world, I'm going to go and push myself to the limit. Is there a point that you remember that happening, or?
Not hugely. As I've referred to being 15, but my school, my big comprehensive school in East Grinstead, called Embark, amazingly took 7 of us to India for a month on a school trip. Like, you wouldn't get that these days, unfortunately, but it was an amazingly sort of shaping trip. So yeah, when I was 15, 2 teachers and 7 of us went to India for a month, and it was rural India. It was like they hadn't seen white people before type of India. It was really, really remote. And it was a shock, India, I think India's a bit of a cultural shock anyway. If you're coming from the UK, it's such a vibrant, rich culture. The sounds, the smells, the sights, the colours, the music, the way they live, if you rural India, very, very different, barefoot, walking along and look at the cows, and that was life out there. So that was huge, and I think that started to shape things, but it wasn't until I was about 15, and that was because we had quite a few issues out there, quite a few challenges, and I found myself rising to the occasion, whereas other people were running around like, losing their heads. So we had tigers roaming around where we were camping, for instance. Some of the big projects that we were due to get involved with were falling through a bit, and also we had a bit too much local interest in some of the girls in the group because we were 15. So we had all sorts of challenges and issues going on, and I think I rose to that challenge and became quite not a leader as such, because I was only 15, but the teachers didn't really cope that well, and I found myself stepping up and sorting stuff out and feeling quite alive by the challenge of being in a different country and having to sort stuff out. So I think that was a start.
Yeah, wow. Like you say, I guess piquing your curiosity and your interest in wanting to. But I guess one thing I'm really keen is like that, wanting to push yourself. I've got a list here as long as my arm of the challenge, the stuff that you've done, your bucket list, and the things that you still want to do. But where does that come from? Like that relentless drive to go, I'm going to go and do that. What was your first challenge where you went, I'm going to go and do this?
Yeah, I think it crept up on me. I will not deny that now I am ambitious and determined and pack my life full of huge challenges, and I have achieved a lot. But I think it crept up on me, to be honest. I did the Global Challenge Round the World Yacht Race in 2004. That was a big leap because I'd never really sailed before and I hadn't done a huge iconic event before. But then I had been backpacking and going to unusual places. So honestly, it was more of an evolution. And where it came from, I think, is literally inside of me because, as I said, my family and relatives and growing up, there was no role model or iconic time or person that really lit me up when I was growing up. But so I think it was a slow evolution, but then once I got that, it's become more and more part of who I am. And definitely I'm for challenge, adventure, achievement, goals, getting to the top of the summit and all that stuff. I'm definitely driven now, but I think it's from within and it's personal. It's not about proving myself or receiving any accolades. It's a personal drive and a personal feeling, and I think it's about being fully alive, living on the edge or something, but not necessarily not risk-taking or daring, but just feeling strong and capable and fully alive. But I think it was an evolution rather than a sudden moment or inspiration, to be honest.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, you sort of, I guess there's a part of it that, again, back to the India part where maybe a little bit of curiosity there. Oh, this is a different culture, a different environment. I want to explore that, and then another element that you might go and travel around and backpack and find other. And then, like you say, that's how it evolves, and that's how you develop that willingness, I guess, to try new things. I guess that's the key. So many people, like I heard you, obviously you've done a TED talk, and I heard you talk about comfort zone and panic zone and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts around that, because obviously there's so many people, generally, I guess, through fear of failure, whatever that looks like, but like to sit in their comfort zone, don't they?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two things in the way of pushing ourselves. One is fear and one is laziness. People, which is partly the comfort zone thing, in that I quite often talk about comfort zone to various groups, and I say, what percentage of your life should you spend in your comfort zone? And they're all like looking at me and scratching their heads because it's a great question. Somebody asked me at once when I was talking about the 3 zones, and they said, seriously, they said, Paula, how much time of our life should we spend in our comfort zone? And I thought, wow, what a great question. So I've been asking people it ever since. If we spend 100% of our life in our comfort zone, I mean, golly gosh, that's languishing, isn't it? So I think the 2 things that can get in the way is fear and comfort or laziness. So I purposely push myself to have a bad time. I just think struggle and suffering are good for us. To have to tough it out, dig deep, try, give things a go, feel the fear and do it anyway. All that sort of stuff I know is good for us. So yeah, that's my drive, I suppose, to not languish in the comfort zone where you're kind of half dead, and keep pushing into the stretch zone, because that's where the energy, motivation, focus, vibrancy, vitality, feeling fully alive, connecting with ourselves and others, all that lovely juicy stuff happens. Yeah, as well as a little bit of anxiety and fear and feeling a bit sick or worried or nervous. Yeah, fine, that's life. Bring it on.
I love, because I loved it in your TED talk. You talked about that, and then you obviously got the panic zone, which you potentially maybe try and avoid if we can, I guess, to a degree. But that's the sweet spot, that stretch zone that you just sort of mentioned, which is key. But then, what was your answer to that for the comfort zone? How long should you spend in the comfort zone?
It's obviously personal, and I don't think there is a statistic out there specifically. But for me, because obviously if I exclude sleeping, because obviously that's, well, I sleep for about 8 hours a day. I sleep quite well.
Nice.
So that's a third of the life, isn't it, in the comfort zone when you're asleep. So excluding that, let's say waking moments, it's good for us sometimes because we need to relax and recover and replenish our energy and process stuff. So maybe 40%. But then I calibrate the scale. So I say, if 10 out of 10 was panic, and I'm not sure there is a 0 out of 10, 0 and 1 out of 10. So if comfort is 0, 1 and 2 out of 10, stretch can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 10. So there's a massive zone in the stretch. There's easy stretch and there's nearly panic stretch, isn't there? But all that zone is cool because it helps us, feel vitally alive and grow and learn. And I really believe in living life to the full and packing it with rich experiences, because you're a long time dead, and I'm not convinced there's life after death, but I think there should be life before death.
I love that. I guess one thing though, like with how good are you just then sitting still and being in the moment? Because if there's that, because we do live in a world with social media and stuff that we got to be productive all the time. I'm very similar. My thing, I talk on here a lot. Life's an opportunity. So I'm like, I'm a yes man. Oh yeah, I'll say yes to that. Say yes to that because I don't know where that's going to go, and it's an opportunity. But with that relentlessness to be productive, to do something all the time, I find it really uncomfortable to sit still up and just not do anything.
Just be.
How are you with that?
Pretty good at it, actually.
Really?
Yeah, because I believe in being present and savouring. So although I'm hugely driven and I'm very active and I pack my life with experience and I'm what's the next goal, what's the next thing, tick it off my list, blah, blah, blah. I am like that for sure. But I also enjoy the deeper, quieter experience of being present and savouring. So I don't meditate much, because I've done a master's degree in positive psychology. I understand all the concepts, if you like, or theories, or whatever you want to call them. So I understand about meditation and mindfulness, but I do that when I'm walking rather than sitting on a mat concentrating on my breathing. I do breathing techniques, and I've done some Wim Hof training, but mostly the sitting still with ease and grace I also love. I just don't do it that much, but that's okay with me. I know I'm driven. I know I'm ambitious and motivated, and I'm all for experience and having an experiential life. But I also appreciate and enjoy savouring and being present. So I'm quite happy sitting with that. But quite often it might involve nature rather than being, in a yoga position on a mat. It might be just watching a bumblebee mooch around the flowers for a bit.
I find this so fascinating, and I'll be keen to tap in, like we said, with your master in psychology and some of the theory around this, I guess, then for me to try and get more of an understanding, and even some of our listeners, because I really struggle with it. I've tried meditation, and I've been for the last year or so, and I've really been, but I find it really difficult. And I understand that actually sitting there and allowing my thoughts to come in and then it to go is actually part of meditation, and that's fine to be able to do that. But I've got such a busy brain; it's so productive that I'm not. If I'm sitting there, especially running a business, and I'm sure a lot of business owners listening will resonate that there's always something to do. So it's just being able to, what tools can we use to be able to go, actually it's okay, stop, and you can let that go. There's always going to be something to do, and what tools can we use to be more present in the moment, and not having to sit down and meditate necessarily, but what can
that's such a common thing. I listen to lots of podcasts and webinars about all sorts of stuff, and mindfulness and meditation always come up, and what you've just said is so common. It is really hard to sit still and to quieten the mind, and actually it's a deep practice. You know, if you're on a deep retreat or a practicing Buddhist monk, they practice for years. It's very hard to clear the mind and to have that passing cloud thing flit through gently. Because we are busy, we do have busy lives, it's hard to quieten it. So I think, and the more we try, the more it kind of gets very difficult. There's one trick I learned actually, which is if you ask yourself inside your head, what's my next thought going to be? That weirdly can quieten the mind. It's an interesting little trick, but practice that sometime maybe. But I think meditation and mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting on a mat trying to clear your mind. I think it's much easier, for me anyway, to go for a walk, to go for a swim, to something like that, because obviously reading and watching telly doesn't do it. You've still got noise and
you're still absorbing content, aren't you?
Content. So walking helps, and nature is easier to be mindful and meditative within, because we are designed to live in nature. You know, evolutionary, we are designed to be outside. So our mind is more programmed, if you like, to look at the shapes and colours of nature. If we go back to being hunter-gatherers or, living outside, our mind and our brains are designed to look at nature and to recognise it and to understand its patterns and colours. We're not designed for hard edges and, generated, even 3D printed nowadays kit with its straight edges and hard edges, and looking around the studio, it's all black and grey and edges. So being in nature, either green therapy or blue therapy, so either water or green stuff, really helps us. And I think just being outside and walking, but also if you slow your pace. We all march around because we're busy and we're running businesses. I do that all the time. I'm constantly marching everywhere and looking very strident and important and busy. But I find myself, if I go for a walk, I start off quite fast and I'm determined to get to the end of the field or over the gate. And then I sometimes have to consciously force myself to slow my pace. And if I do that, I can feel myself reconnecting with the universe, as it were, and being much more mindful, meditative. And then the sounds of the birds start to creep into my head. It's like, oh, there are birds, or the smell of the grass, whatever. So I think physically walking, moving helps rather than just sitting still and forcing it. I think being outside is better for us and more conducive to being mindful or meditative, because we are designed to live in nature. And there's less content. And I think consciously slowing our pace when we suddenly become conscious, because all the time we're marching along, we're not even thinking about where we are and what's around us. We're just, going through all that stuff in our head. So I think you go, hold on, slow down. And you start to do that, and then you spot that there's some deer in the woods next to you and stuff like that. So then you allow it, and then you get that peace and ease without forcing it so much or trying to be the perfect meditator.
I love that, because you almost, and then you beat yourself up because you're sitting there doing it. I'm rubbish at this. And then, so for me, when we sort of spoke offline before, but the whole swimming thing for me is because even when I run, I love running as well, and I've run marathons, half marathon, but I listen to music or I listen to a podcast. I'm listening to something I'm absorbing in relation to content. Whereas swimming, you're just especially in the sea, you're in there and you're just concentrating on that 1, 2, 3, breathe, 1, 2, and that for me, I that's the only time necessarily I can maybe let things go.
Lose the noise.
Yeah, lose the noise.
Yeah.
A bit.
It's forced as well, I think. So as you know, I do lots of adventures and I talk about the psychology of that, but part of it is forcing us to be present because we're in an environment which is, I think, variable and complex. Well, not complex, but you're having to concentrate if you're swimming because otherwise you drown or you choke. So there's something about being in the water, which is a variable, moving, dynamic environment where we have to be present to make decisions about the breath or the stroke or the staying alive or climbing a mountain. You have to watch where your feet are going. There's something about that simple task where you are in flow, which I think helps us to lose all the noise and the chatter. The same can be actually for like playing a guitar or painting a picture. There's that loss of the noise and the chatter and the internal dialogue, and you're then in flow. But I do think if you're physically moving within a natural environment, it forces it a bit because you have to watch where you're going, you have to watch your step, you have to, keep breathing or something. So it does force it a bit. I think that helps. But there's something about that simplicity as well. So when I cycle, again, I'm probably having to be quite aware of the environment to stay safe, but then my mind quietens. So a lot of the sports, exercises, going for walks, being in nature. I've been going out to Ukraine to serve pizza, and it's such a simple mission, and I find myself getting more and more happy and content and calm despite the air raid sirens and so on going on. That obviously doesn't help, but the serving pizza to people that are grateful and giving them a hug now and again. It's a simple life. But it's the same when I'm on an adventure. It's the simple life, and all that noise gradually dissipates.
It's that, we talked before, and you mentioned about the essence of the podcast and what is it you're trying to talk about, success and our society in a financial status and etc. But actually listening to you talk, and many people I've spoke to on the podcast, and I guess one of my missions is to try and delve deeper into that, is that exactly that, like actually real success, just being able to live a life that we're in the moment and present. It's got to be where that true joy and happiness and fulfillment comes from, right?
That would be my definition of success. I was in the Evening Standard, I think, rich list, and it was how rich we were in life rather than in money. And for me, success is being present. For other people, for myself, for just enjoying and savouring whatever's going on. So, yeah. But I do also enjoy making money.
And I think,
so if I can say that dirty word, I do work and I enjoy that too. I love the challenges and the having to be productive and deliver and get paid for it. Fine.
And I think that it's really strange. Again, like I almost feel like really conflicted sometimes inside, like saying, like staying out of Star Wars, feel conflicted, but mainly because exactly that, like we need money to survive, and I want that financial security, because that the lack of that is what might keep me up at night and worry about I've got to pay the bills, got to pay mortgage, put food on the table, to provide for the kids, and all of those things that what money will help with. And then at the same time, we've got this mission over here to try and just create a life that's fulfilled and do the things I love doing. This, for example, and all of them things there, that I'm doing things that light me up every day and I enjoy, and be present with my kids and have that fulfillment over here. So you're like, but I need this over here, so I'm driven to get this, but I'm not really money motivated. So where does that balance, or where does that come in? How do we achieve that?
Yeah, it's that blend or balance again, isn't it, that we were talking about before. The money generating thing I actually enjoy as well, though. For me, I like feeling fit, as in fit when I go for a walk, but also fit for business. You know, it's concentrated, focused, motivated, determined, productive, concentrating on performance and engagement and delivery and quality. That also, you know, pleases me. But if you did all one or all the other, then I don't think life would be quite such a rich tapestry. So, you know, if we worked so hard and were genuinely motivated and excited by that, great. But you would become quite hard or edgy or burnout. But then if you did all that lovely presence and relationships and heartwarming stuff, fantastic. But if your life just became that, would you lose a little bit of muscle in the other area? So I think a bit like, you know, going to the gym, you do a full body workout. So you have to, you know, do exercises for your legs just as much as your arms or back or chest or abdomen. And I think with life, you know, the full body life experience, I've never said it like this before, but there you go, I think could include, you know, the different workouts. And one is making money, and a lot of people have to. It's not a choice, right? So then it's about finding something pleasing or something that matters. So in the positive psychology world, we're talking less these days about the meaning of life or the purpose of life and more about what matters. It's an easier word to grapple with, and it's a smaller thing to find. So rather than what is your life purpose or what is the meaning of life, is actually what matters. And I think with the work stuff, you know, what matters and why does it matter? And with your family stuff, what matters and why? And you can mix the two. And then I think it's about being comfortable with that rather than being restless and think I should be doing that, I should be that. In work life, I should be at home, or at home, I should be doing some work. Because that doesn't help, does it? Because then you've got a very restless spirit and a restless mind, and you're not happy in either camp. So part of it is also acceptance that life needs to be a mix of that and that, or acceptance that for the next 6 months I'm going to have to put my head down and earn some decent cash to pay the mortgage. Just accepting it, because otherwise it's that battle in your head about I don't want to be doing this or I should be doing that, which doesn't help for a peaceful life.
I love a couple of things there for me. One is doesn't have to be either or. I think that's a key thing, really, because it is sometimes you go, I've got to be this. Oh, I want to sort of be this, but it doesn't have to be. Like you said, it can be that mix. And I think, and I always, one of the things I probably struggle with is the whole work-life balance thing, and because I've got young kids and I want to be there for them as much as I can, as much as I'm ambitious and I want to do all these other things as well. So trying to get, but there was a guy I interviewed, a guy called Rob Starr on here, and he gave me a good analogy similar to how you've sort of described it. Actually, life's just that, and it can be chaotic, and all them things are in there, and it doesn't have to be. There's going to be some days. Acceptance is the key. I think there's going to be some days that I'm a really good dad. Might not be a great businessman that day, but I'm a really good dad because I'm there and I've seen the assembly, but I've missed a couple of meetings or I've been there, whatever that looks like. And then other days that I'm going to be a really good businessman, but I've not been as good dad. And actually, because I haven't been around, I've got up early and done a breakfast meeting, and I've gone up to London that night, and I've got home late, and I've not really seen the kids, and I've been but just accepting that actually is going to be a balance there. And I think. I guess that's what
and
you
being
get
present in each. Being present when you are with the kids and being present when you are at work. Rather than your mind drifting off and thinking you should be elsewhere. So, yeah. And, you know, life's complicated, isn't it? And it would be blooming boring if it wasn't. We've all got all these dilemmas and struggles, and let's face it, most people have got harder lives than we've got. And we're pretty blooming lucky and privileged to be sitting here, for instance. So... So yeah, I mean, it's a complex, three-dimensional, dynamic life, isn't it? That we're having to constantly play and make, you know, minute decisions all the time. But accepting that and being present wherever you are at that moment in time, I think, makes it richer, more pleasing than constantly wishing or hoping or being frustrated that you're not somewhere else.
Love that. There's, like you mentioned about gratitude there, and like, As the experiences that you've had, like especially like you alluded to with the Ukraine and stuff like that, does that enable you to live that more rich, fulfilled? Because you are grateful. Do you practice gratitude? Is that something you gratitude journal and stuff like that? Is that something you do, or?
Yeah, I love gratitude. I think it's brilliant. Three good things is the easiest one to do, which is just what 3 things you're grateful for right now. So what 3 things are you grateful for right now?
Grateful I've got my health. Grateful that I'm grateful I've got the opportunity to sit here and have this conversation with you. And I guess I'm grateful that my family are healthy as well, and I'm surrounded by love, which is a lucky thing to have.
Nice. So that was great for me to hear as well. So you possibly felt, well, I can see it in your face.
Yeah.
Rebalanced, maybe happier. Probably your brain opened up a bit, and your body and psychology as well would have felt a bit more peaceful and relaxed because you were thinking of those things. So it resources you and gives you energy to perhaps then tackle the harder stuff as well. But practicing gratitude, I do the 3 good things every now and again. I don't do it religiously because I don't want it to become a chore. But it is now a natural-ish habit which I can draw on and use quite a lot. I did it yesterday, and 3 good things. 3 things we're grateful for. So I do that, and I am constantly grateful, but I'm always inspired as well. I'm inspired by other people and their achievements and goals and hopes and fears and, what they do and what they think. So being grateful, but I'm also inspired a lot. I'm inspired by the world and the planet. And I'm also more on the optimistic scale than the pessimistic. So when you asked me before about AI, understandably, lots and lots of people are completely doom and gloom about AI because it could destroy us. And for me, the worst case scenario is it could also destroy our beautiful planet. I'd rather we went than nature went, because I think nature's bigger and better than us, but there we go. Or you could look at AI and say it's the best thing in the whole world and it's going to save the world and cure everything. And I'm more towards that end than the other. So being grateful, accepting, being slightly more optimistic than pessimistic, and being inspired by people in the world. Those are the things that feed me. So when I go to Ukraine, I'm obviously grateful that I can even go, that I have the courage and determination and time to go, let alone, the perspective it gives you when you see and hear some of the horrendous stories and experiences that are going on out there. So perspective too. These are all good things.
Yeah. Can you share some of them stories from the Ukraine that's touched you, affected you, or giving you that perspective?
Yeah, I was reflecting last night because I'm going out again soon, and on the surface, it's people are generally going about their daily lives, and I'm not talking about the military who are fighting at the front line, but the rest of the country who I meet and see and serve pizzas to. They're determinedly going about their daily lives. They're going shopping. They're meeting up for a drink. They're going to church on a Sunday and all that. But then underneath the surface, there's that deep trauma. They're really tired, so they're fatigued by 2 years of worrying and potentially being woken up by the air raid sirens and not sleeping very well, of course. They are angry, which obviously isn't a healthy state to be in, but totally understandable. So they've got deep and strong and hard anger. They've got the constant worry of someone they know probably fighting or on the front line or about to be called up. They know more and more people who've died, because the longer it goes on, 2 years now, the more people are dying. So where they might have known a neighbour's friend who died, now they might know 10 people personally who have died. They're living with the disruption of power cuts and cold and physical buildings or bridges or roads being hit or destroyed. So that's physically demanding and tiring, and so on. So on the surface, resilient, amazing, smiling, grateful, eating pizzas. Underneath, you make eye contact, you give someone a hug, and it's all bubbling away there underneath. So on my second day out there, which was in March last year, the second day I was serving, I was physically along the front serving pizzas. Sometimes I'm cooking, but I was actually on the front meeting everyone. And, you've got hundreds of Ukrainians, and if you make eye contact with them all, you are crying all day.
Really?
Yeah, it's just that connection and the gratitude in their eyes and the love, kindness, hope, desperation sometimes. And if you hug them properly, like properly hug, they cling to you and can't let go. So you've got kind of those two layers. You've got getting on with everyday life, but then you've got that deep trauma and tiredness and anger, and that's going to take a lot of healing. Another story, we went and served pizza in a little wooded village that had been occupied. So the Russians had come in, and then they set up a kind of sniper on the crossroads of the village, so that anyone venturing out, there was a sniper potentially picking them off, which was disgusting. And the local school teacher, female, got shot at this crossroads, and nobody could get her because the sniper was there, and she just lay there for 3 days, dying quite loudly. And all the kids are in the area, and they're kind of seeing and hearing all this, and she was their school teacher. So there are deeply difficult situations going on there, which we don't always appreciate. I think the media shows footage, of course, which is desperate and awful. But when you hear or see about these personal stories and experiences, it's bad. It's bad. So on the surface, they're being amazing. They're being resilient and strong and determined. Underneath, there's a lot of hell going on.
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
Thank you, I guess, for sharing. I think, like you said, ask how you gain perspective, and I guess listening to stories like that, anyone listening as well, it gives us an idea of how like you said, us sitting here right now, how lucky we are and how grateful we are to be in this. Like, I took my kids to school this morning, and how lucky I am that they're there and be healthy, like we said, and not having to think about them type of things.
Sorry, you did ask.
No, but I'm so grateful again, like I said, for being able to share that, because it is something. For me, it's really powerful that we're able to have conversations like this and talk openly like that and share these things, because, like I said, there's a certain element that the media will show that we get a snapshot of it, right? But someone who's been over there and seen it and looked in people's eyes and had that connection and been on the ground and seen what it's like and being able to share that gives people a bit more.
That's the real stuff.
The real stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, talk to me a little bit about, like, you mentioned about other people's challenges and stuff there, and I like to on here always talk about challenges we face in life and stuff. Look, I listed quite a few in the introduction of different challenges expeditions you've done. Talk to me about all the hundreds of stuff that you've done. So if you could pinpoint your biggest challenge, what would that be?
All
What
right.
did you learn from that?
Gosh. How long have we got? Right.
And for episode
Concentrate,
2.
Paula. Yeah, so I think I'd like to draw a parallel between two, because two challenges I've done have both been huge and iconic, but they're differently challenging. So one was the global challenge around the world yacht race, and one was skiing to the South Pole. Right, both massive, right? Mm-hmm. And they're almost equal in their demands off of me, but very, very different. So the Global Challenge yacht race, I'd not really sailed before. So there's being at sea for 10 months, hugely demanding. So physically really demanding. I think we were talking about being seasick as well, weren't we, before this?
I might struggle with that.
Anyway, so you're being physically sick. You've got, such a dynamic. You've got the sea and the weather. So you've kind of got you've got 360-degree environment of dynamic, dangerous stuff. So the waves and the water, and then obviously what comes out the sky. So wind, sleet, snow, icebergs, 22-metre waves, really strong winds, and the boat is vulnerable. It gets tipped over or knocked over, or you get a massive wave crashing over it. So very physical. We're racing 24 hours a day for weeks on end. So you've got that performance and drive and determination to perform and to beat the competition, which is very intense. But then you're sharing a small space with 17 other people. So you can imagine the demands physically, sailing, competing, racing, performing, and then trying to get on with 17 people in a 72-foot long boat. 24 hours a day. Intense, amazing, really demanding. I'm really proud of that one. But then contrast that to skiing to the South Pole. You're sort of alone. I mean, I was actually skiing with 4 others, but you ski solo, single file, and your face is covered in masks and goggles and against the wind and the snow. So it feels kind of like a solo effort. And you're not being transported. It's your own physical movement that's getting you from A to B. Whereas on a boat, you're on a boat. So it feels solo. You're in a white world. Again, 360 degrees is just white. It's beneath you 2 miles of ice and snow thick. And then sometimes you're in a whiteout physically that you can't see a thing, or the air is full of snow or cloud. And that is a determinedly solo, gritty, resilient mental effort. Very different, right? Very different. And I'm equally kind of proud of them both. But they challenged me in very different ways, and I learnt very different things. But they're the two kind of highlights, if you like.
Yeah.
But very different.
So, because I guess, like as you mentioned, with your experience, like you said, you're part of a team and you're getting through, I guess, like you said, different dynamics, leadership in different areas. You're all leaders in some way and you're all chipping in and doing stuff, but it's a community thing. You're doing it together as a thing, whereas, like you said, I guess the mindset side of stuff is completely different in regards to the solo effort. You play at a football team and you're part of something. You do it. You run a marathon. It's you against the just in your mindset.
Yeah,
so just completely different.
That's it. That's the And if again running a business, I suppose if we take it one step further, it's a bit like being part of a team or being the boss, I suppose. Because when you're an employee and you're on a project, you've got all your mates and you're all saying whatever you want to say, but you're part of that collective energy, collective effervescence it's called sometimes, but you've got that collaboration and collective spirit, and you're just playing a part in the big machine, which is quite nice sometimes. You don't have that weight of responsibility and single-mindedness, and you'll get energy from your teammates, but they can also do the opposite, can't they? They're not always perfect.
Yeah.
So being a team is good and bad. You've got obviously difficult people, or people you don't get on with, or people that suck your energy and so on. Whereas perhaps skiing South Pole was a bit more of a leadership experience, where you might be lonely at the top, right? You might be an entrepreneur trying to get a startup going on your own, or you might be at the top of a business where it's a bit lonely and you haven't really got that collective energy quite so much. So it's a bit more of a single mental effort, maybe.
Yeah. I like, and then because I heard you talk about as well on the South Pole. What didn't you, like a couple of days in, you had some issues with your thighs and stuff? Talk to me about that and what happened there.
So we were warned before we departed by the medics that we might get polar thigh, which is it's a more recent phenomenon than way back in the sort of Scott Amundsen days. But it's a non-freezing cold injury, and normally you're medevaced away from the trip if you get it, because it's quite serious and it mucks up both of your thighs. So we were warned about it, and essentially you're skiing into the wind, so you've got the katabatic winds that roll off the polar plateau, and you're skiing in from the coast. So you've got these winds that are blowing into your face, basically, plus the movement of skiing all the time, 12 hours a day, within the freezing environment, which might be minus 20 down to minus 40 plus wind chill. So that's the environment. And on day 7, we'd had a particularly cold and windy day, and the tents that we slept in were red. So it was quite hard if you took an item, if you looked at your flesh, it was quite hard to differentiate the colour of your skin, because you had this red light coming through the walls of the tent. The sun never sets, so, the whole inside of the tent is kind of red. So it's quite hard to look at your skin and know what's going on with it. But I did notice a load of lumps all over my thighs on day 7. And at first I just thought they were kind of chilblains, which, are cold symptoms. And I got onto the satellite phone that day to the medics, and they said, you've got polar thigh, which was a real shocker, because the warning before we left was, your trip's over if you get polar thigh. It's serious stuff. So for the next 2 days, I had to carry on skiing while they were working out how to medevac me out. And they have to find a runway. They have to find a decent, flattish bit of Antarctica that a ski plane can land on. So you can't stop immediately and get picked up. But you have to crack on until they're operationally ready to pick you up and know where to pick you up and all that. It's quite a big deal, obviously. So I spent 2 days skiing along, but not towards the South Pole, just towards a blooming medevac. And I remember distinctly my energy and motivation completely floored. So mentally and physically, no energy whatsoever, no energy, no motivation, no focus, lost my mojo, just wanted to sit down and cry, and completely fed up, disappointed, dejected, frustrated, all that stuff you can completely imagine, can't you? Where, I just thought, well, that's the end of everything, really. And it was really hard to keep skiing. I remember the physical effect, the physical impact of just that news. Anyway, by the end of the second day of all that, so day 9, I began to get fed up with that voice in my head going, Paula, you're rubbish, you're useless, you're gonna die, you failed, you're gonna stop, you're not longer going to South Pole, you spent a year getting ready for it, all that training, it's not gonna happen, you ridiculous thing, how rubbish, how awful, how useless, how painful. And I got fed up with it and told it to shut up in the end. And then it went quiet in my head, like sulking in a corner, my little My little earworm went and sat in the corner with its back to me. It's how I picture it, seriously, and went really quiet. And I remember skiing along and being so relieved I didn't have this negative flipping self-talk going on. And then, out of the silence, came a little tentative voice saying, hold on, Paula, why don't you carry on and see how far you can get? Because, you know, you're quite a strong person and you're mentally quite tough. So why don't you carry on? And I did, basically. So that night on the satellite phone, I said to the medics, I said, look, do I really have to quit? Do I really have to medevac out? And there was a bit of a pause. And then they went, well, no. And I'm like, flipping it, why didn't you say that in the first place?
2 days ago, I'd have been.
Yeah. Holy moly, you've put me through hell in the last 2 days. And basically they said, you've got to manage the pain and manage the risk of infection. And then you could potentially carry on. And I'm like, well, alrighty then, there's a plan.
Wow.
So manage the pain, yeah, and manage the risk of infection. I can do that. So I carried on and I got there 39 days later in complete pain and with pretty horrible looking legs, I must say. I think on the last night I was even quite feverish. So I was probably on the edge of clinging on, but I did it, and I'm so pleased I did. So it was fascinating because I literally went from victim to master mentality, as it's officially called, but definitely felt everything collapse for 2 days.
Wow. Yeah. That's that specific type of mindset. You mentioned about self-talk there, and then I loved the way you described it as well. Like, they're getting on my nerves, getting her back there, because so many people don't maybe create that in our heads, do we? But we have negative self-talk, don't we? But what do you think? Someone that people in life, glass half empty, half full, positive, optimistic, you sort of say. Do you think that we all have the ability to have that mindset, that positive mindset, change that, like change from a victim mentality to...
Yeah, for sure we do. I know we do, but it does take some practice and training and knowledge and awareness. So yes, we are definitely all capable of that mindset, and mindset is everything. The ability to choose, the freedom to choose. Viktor Frankl, concentration camp, the worst of all human conditions, of all human lived experience in a concentration camp where everything's taken away from you. You haven't got any warmth or clothing or food or shelter or family or friends. Horrible, grim, hopeless conditions. And he said the last of our freedoms, the last of all our human freedoms, is the freedom to choose in any given circumstances, and the freedom to choose our attitude. It's the choice of attitude. The mindset thing, that no matter what happens to us, we can still choose to hold our head up, to crack on, to be kind, to be respectful, to keep moving, to not retire, to not quit, all that sort of stuff. It's massive. And everyone has that within them. But it takes some self-awareness initially to know where you're at with that, you know, whether you're good at that or not, or whether it's natural or not. And then it perhaps takes some practice. And some training sort of thing, being made aware, being educated about what mindset is and how to achieve it. Like we were saying earlier about mindfulness and meditation, there are ways and ways of doing it, but awareness is first. And then practicing it, and then practice it under pressure. So in harder circumstances, practice it in easy circumstances first, and then practice under pressure. And then keep training it, and then it will become more habitual. Like I was saying before, like practicing gratitude, it becomes just a natural part of you, a natural part to pick yourself up from the floor and crack on. So yeah, we've definitely all got the ability to do that.
Because I think, like, I listen to you talk, and one of the main reasons I think I ask always about people's upbringing and about childhood and stuff, because so much of that can shape mindsets and where we are to a degree, I think. So you mentioned about, you know, similar to me, surrounded by love and growing up and unconditional love, that you grow up in that environment to then similar to, I think, our was as well in that sense. So potentially then, and around positivity and optimism and those type of things were put into my brain, and then you get the other people potentially who have grown up in a negative environment. How difficult is that then to drag that? Because their default is to go to that victim mentality, isn't it? It's their default to go to that. But you're still saying that by practicing you can alter that.
And that's been studied now with epigenetics and plasticity and all those sorts of things. So the science is still developing. We don't understand exactly everything yet, of course, about how these things work. Our brains, let alone the less tangible woo-woo stuff like our spirit or our soul. But brains and vagus nerve and nervous system, we're beginning to grapple with a bit more. There's still lots of stuff that's unknown so far, and evolution and how evolution programs our psychology, for instance. So there's still lots of stuff we don't quite understand, but we're getting there. And part of it is the nature-nurture debate. So at the moment, the evidence would suggest that we can be self-directive or self-responsible and have lots of ability to choose and to be optimistic. The most negatively impacted people are potentially if, as a child, let's say between the ages of 3 and 8, you were deeply traumatised. That then is quite difficult, but not impossible, to move away from. But lots of children do. I'm not saying it's a prescription, a set thing. That it's just if at a certain age when you're most, forming, that's the hardest one to shift, but very, very possible, and lots of children do. Apart from that, we're all very capable of being self-determining. And then genetically, there might be a genetic leaning towards, a predisposition towards, for instance, optimism or pessimism, but it's just a predisposition. It's not fixed or set. So epigenetics looks on, epi means on top of. So on top of genetics, there is stuff that happens. There are choices that we can take, and our brain is plastic. It can also change its programming. So to a certain extent, life does lay the way for us a bit, but the science and evidence is suggesting that there is a lot that we can self-determine and change and train and practice and build the different wiring, different muscles, different nervous connections and all that, and brain connections, the neurons in our brain. It might take harder work for some people than others.
And I guess so much of that, to a degree, will be down to choice. I want to choose to go down that path, or accept I'm this way and that's it. Or I choose, I want to explore. And so much in life about look, talk about the South Pole, the choice there on that day that you could have, because that was potentially the easier path, wasn't it? You're in a lot of pain. You've been told potentially that you should get off the thing, but you made a choice on that day that actually, no, I can do this. And 39 days later, you achieved it.
And I've had an easy life, but I still choose to make it hard. I choose to go to Ukraine. I've never done a war zone before. I'm a middle-aged woman, for goodness sake. I still choose to go there. It's dangerous and it's hard. I choose to go to South Pole. I choose to go sailing around the world, even though I've never sailed before. Because, my life has been quite easy, and we are privileged, and we are lucky and all that. But I choose to make it harder and tougher because I know it's good for me.
Why though? Why? Because that's where you learn, or what?
All that lovely stuff. So you learn and you grow and you gather wisdom and experience, but also you are developing muscles, if you like. So your brain, your body, your spirit, your soul, your heart, your toolbox, your skill set, it's all developing. Because I'm choosing to put myself through harder stuff. I lean into that, I embrace it, I make it happen because, I've had a very comfortable life, but I know it's good for me. It's good for my heart, soul, spirit, brain, body to be put through some difficult times.
What do you say to someone? What advice you give to someone sitting there and they go, yeah, it sounds great, but I'd love to do some of these training, but you know what, I've got a family, I've got this, and you know, work and blah blah blah, and all them, I guess potentially, I say excuses, but just reasons not to do something. What do you say? What would you say to people like that?
The glib answer is just do it. There's a longer answer, but the glib answer still kind of works. You know, stop making excuses and just make it happen. So that is also a true statement. Whereas I do obviously acknowledge and recognise and respect that there's other stuff going on with people's lives, of course.
Yeah.
But you know, one answer is, you know, just make it happen. Go on then. I quite often say, go on then. Oh, I'd like to do this. I'd like to. Go on then. And quite often I'll encourage, coach, motivate, support somebody to do something that they were nervous about or worried about, and shake hands with them on it. And then they go and do it, and they're really proud and happy that they did. But that's me. So as we said before, life's complicated and complex, and there's lots going on. We do have to work for money, most of us. We do have family support, most of us. We do have other pulls and ties. But again, one answer is don't let that completely govern and rule your life, because otherwise you'll be on your deathbed before you know it and looking back thinking, you know, what have I done and what have I achieved, and all those regrets and so on. So part of it, you need to be brutally determined to make other stuff happen. And that might be carving some time for yourself, not to constantly be giving to others or work or family, but to be selfish and carve some time to yourself to achieve stuff. Or I quite often recommend like a bucket list as a family, where you all sit round the table and create either a family bucket list or 4 or 5 separate bucket lists for everyone around the table, and you all make stuff happen. And you can either make it happen together or make it or support each other achieving, you know, each other's little bucket list things. That's quite a nice one. And also, yeah, it's a nice one, isn't it?
That as a family to sit there and go, all of us sit around the table. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you do?
That's
I know
all.
my kids are young at the minute, but even then, still at that young age, just encourage.
And maybe
that.
have 10 ones as a family as well.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a collective
exactly,
one that goes up on the kitchen wall and you tick off every weekend, or depending on what they are. I had a friend who died of cancer, and while he was still alive, he did that with his family because he wanted them to have something to look forward to when he'd gone. And it was called 100 Happy Days. And it was 100 things as a family they could all think of doing once he'd passed away. Super.
Yeah.
And the list was up on the kitchen wall. After the funeral, we went back to the house, and the 100 Happy Days list was up on the kitchen wall.
Wow.
And it was things like going to McDonald's,
Yeah.
as well as perhaps some more. That's a happy day, happy meal, happy day. I'm not a fan, by the way. I'm not a fan.
My kids would say so. Probably.
So yeah, doing a family bucket list and individual bucket lists. And that could become a scrapbook or a mood board or a poster or a book or on the computer or website or whatever. Because then you're striving towards other stuff that matters. And the other thing is, I think as a parent, let's say, I quite often get asked things like, well, obviously you haven't got any children and all that. I do have responsibilities. I have had stepchildren. My mother's 90. But I think you can still be an inspirational role model. So as a parent, if you have children that aren't overly dependent on you, and if you do have support, why not go and do a thing that they then follow and talk about to their mates and are proud of, and you come back a bigger, better person as a result, and they can see that their mother or father has done something incredible and it did them good. and it gives the children the message that, you know, we can go off and do some interesting, amazing things.
I am a big fan of that, because I do. Me and my wife talk about this. We've been together many years, and you know, twins are still they're 8 now or whatever. But I still, as much as I'm a father and I love them to bits, and I'm a husband as well. I'm still me. My wife is still her, and I still think that actually by us both following, I tell my kids every night when they go to bed, I go, dream me a million dreams. I want them to dream big, and I want them to have them things, but I also want them to see that I'm following my dreams still.
Exactly.
It's not that they've made many of my many dreams come true for me, being the most amazing kids in the world, and that's amazing. But I've still got personal dreams. And I want them to see me follow them, and I think
exactly.
And a mutual friend of ours, obviously Neil Lawton, has been on the podcast. We sort of spoke about some stuff, and he said obviously he was away a lot, you know, with the kids growing up and stuff like that. But he said one of his proudest moments, and this was really touching actually. One of his proudest moments, he recently took the children, the family, all went to Nepal, and they chose to do a bungee jump, or they done something. Just they walked past, they saw something, and went and done that adventure. And he was like, that was just such a magical moment for him, because then you look at all them things you sort of talk about, and actually by him doing those things, all right, maybe he wasn't around as much as he would have been if he hadn't gone trekking up Mount Everest or whatever as many times he did. But actually he's inspired, he's been an inspiration to them, as he has to many other people. I think there's some, again, balance is something in that, isn't there, to be able to still do
I think so. And not to completely give ourselves fully to everyone else, because then we become maybe a bit insipid or pale. And also, I don't often do this, but speaking on behalf of women for a change, I'm more into inclusivity, and I don't often pick out the women thing. But quite often I do think that mothers need to be seen to get their identity back from having kids. Quite often they lose themselves a bit in the family, and maybe before they got married or had children, you know, they were achieving great things, or I mean they still are obviously having a family, I'm not denying that, but they can lose themselves a bit and regret perhaps a bit of, oh, I used to do this, or I've lost myself. And I think perhaps more especially for women, that to show that they've got balls, which is the wrong word to use, but I've used it on purpose. I was going to say guts. Anyway, you know, there's a different identity to them just beyond being a mother or whatever. And again, role modelling, inspiring, generating strength, people virtually living through their amazingness. And even for me, going to Ukraine, mum, 90 years old, hates me going to Ukraine, sort of, but loves it as well. So, you know, she'll say, oh, don't go, or she'll be worried, but she completely gets why I go. And she loves that I go, and she talks to her mates about it, and she's proud of it, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So there's an element of that.
I agree. And this episode obviously would be released the Monday after, just would have been International Women's Day. Which is incredible. And I think hopefully, like you say, having such an inspirational woman on the show and will inspire people to exactly do that. I completely agree. And I think, again, like I said, me and I'll go from my experience. Me and my wife have been together we went to school together, been together 20 odd years. And she always wanted to be a solicitor, and then obviously had kids, and she's still a solicitor, but she wants to be a judge now, and that's her next, and she's following that path and that dream, and I love that. And it's tough at the moment, because trying to do that puts then financial pressures on the family and stuff like that. But actually, I love that. Again, back to my relationship with money. I always believe it will be all right, and I think it will. We'll find money, and we'll be okay. Like you said, we live in a privileged world, I guess, and I can always generate something to keep us going. And I think that's got to be balanced with them following them dreams and doing them things that you.
And your 8-year-old's taking note.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I want to just touch, just before we're coming towards the sort of end, I do want to touch on say cliche about the journey and the process and stuff like that. There's so many of what you do and you achieve with because you set yourself a goal. I'm going to do the South Pole, I'm global. Talk to me about that process of the journey, the training, all of them things to that moment that you cross that line, you finish that thing. Is it that euphoria moment that you promise yourself, or talk to me about that feeling? I've spoke to Olympic champions on here and that type of thing, who go, get to that, set yourself a goal, I've got that. Is it that euphoria moment? Talk to me about them. Look, 120 odd challenges I can go through on here.
I know, I'm just thinking, as you can probably see, I think it is a journey. There's something called Hero's Journey, which I quite often allude to, which is Joseph Campbell came up with this as a sort of Uber storyline. If you think of your favourite film, there will be a heroic character in it, I'm sure, who goes on a journey, and it's classic. You know, you quite often choose to go on that journey, and then you have the journey full of trials and tribulations and ups and downs, and there are allies who support you on your journey, and there are enemies who take away from you on your journey. And then there's the ultimate nadir of the journey, which is the pit of disaster and the worst moment of the whole thing. And then you're rising back up from that. A few final tests and challenges to strengthen your resilience and resolve. And, you know, you practice using your new shiny new spear and your shiny new shield, which are parts of your strengths and skills, of course. And you come back up and out, and then you come back to your ordinary known world again, but you come back more heroic and transformed than when you left. So that's what's going on. That's a classic Joseph Campbell hero's journey model, and you know, I've been through several of those. So yeah, I think the journey starts when you first decide to do whatever it is that you're going to do, because it's not just the actual project or venture or challenge, is it? It's the lead up too, and the lead up can be equally difficult and enjoyable as the actual thing. We talked before about swimming the channel or running a marathon. Most of the time is spent in training, not on the swimming the channel or running the marathon. The months or years of prep compared to a few hours doing a marathon or swimming a channel or whatever it is. So I think the journey starts at that first decision point, which is the call to adventure on the hero's journey story. So there's a call to adventure, and you say yes or no. And from that moment on, you're on that journey. I love that because it's rich. I love experiencing and being fully alive. So whether it's a good or bad experience, bring it on. So that it could be a high, or it could be a low, low. It could be the most amazing, awesome, literally filled, awful is where the word came from. It could be the most ecstatic. Sometimes it's called ecstatic growth or peak, obviously, experience. It could be amazing. It could also be the worst, horrendous, shittiest, darkest day. But I kind of like that too, because that's what living's about. So you've got all the ups and downs, and you've got your enemies and allies. You've got the darkest moment, and then you've got the rising back up with new strengths and skills, and then you get there. Wow. But then you go back to your ordinary known world, but you've got these renewed strengths, and you've mastered stuff, and you have had a heroic journey. So you have to adjust back into the known ordinary world. And again, this is part of the model, but it's true. It's that adjustment that's hard, because you've been heroic. You know, you've risen to the challenge. You've been strong. You've cried. You've bled. You've worked hard. Your physical and mental muscles are pumped. Everyone's been watching, going, "Wow!" It's a very full, intense, high and low experience. But you have to adjust back into known world. You can't constantly be on a heroic journey. I guess some people might have done in history, but not really. And I think that adjustment's good for us because it knocks the edges off our ego. You know, we come back all like, "Look at me, aren't I amazing?" But we need to kind of get rid of the ego a bit again. So I think it's good for us to have to adjust back to the known world. And to be a little bit flat and deflated is natural. So there is such a thing which is post-adventure blues, post-project, post-crisis, post-COVID, post-startup. Any excitement, dynamic, challenging, exciting time, which is what venture actually means. It's a challenging undertaking. So some of your listeners who are doing startups or they're entrepreneurs, and a venture is a challenging undertaking. Advent just means it's in the future. So there will be a flatter period of post the drama, post the heroic undertaking, where you do have to adjust. But I do think that's good for us. And we learn to fit back in with our new skills and strengths.
Love that. And I guess back to one of the things you obviously talked about earlier as well, about with that whole journey experience, if you're able to be in the moment as much as possible, you get so much from that. So you're not just fixed on that thing at the end, that shiny object that's going to be that finishing across. Was a guy, Johnny Wilkinson, obviously the rugby player, talked about it. About him, he went through so much depression after winning the World Cup because everything had been geared up towards him kicking that World Cup winning goal, and he done that, and then like you said, he didn't know how to adapt and deflect because nothing was going to reach that 30-second high that he achieved at that moment.
I know, I remember it well.
Yeah. We all, everyone, like he said,
I was in a pub.
And you go, but everything in his life had built up to that moment, and I think, and then he was deflated. So it's so interesting to look at it, and I think he talks about it really openly now about his depression, but talking about actually the key is to be present in the moment and enjoying every part of that. And like you said, it's really nice to how you described it, I guess, adapting back as well. That's just part and parcel of that journey. And still being present in a moment.
And there are things we can do. If I'm coaching someone, I do adventure psychology, so I can coach adventurers quite often, and I'll coach them through the post-return period. It's all part of it.
Because that's part of part of the journey.
So, and I also talk about aiming for beyond the finishing line. So South Pole, it's a physical finishing line. There is a South Pole. Whereas some other adventures or journeys are not quite so specific in their ending. But aiming for beyond the finishing line is something that I talk about, because otherwise we can give up or collapse a bit just before the end, because we start to think, I've got there now. And then all that focus energy just dissipates. But also what's after that South Pole? What's after that final kick of Johnny Wilkinson? And to be mindful of that. So I talk to people about celebrating and enjoying that achievement. We really should wallow in it and drink all the champagne and tell all our mates.
Have you allowed yourself to do that?
Yeah.
Love that.
It's part of it, isn't it? It's part of that sort of anchoring of the success. As we should with all sorts of successes and achievements. When we look back, we go, look how far I've come. So celebrations, and then some processing, which can be journaling or speaking or being interviewed or writing a book. That's all good for processing the experience and acknowledging and recognising and validating and all that, making it firm and getting to grips with it and understanding it. Reviews and debriefs. So what did I learn from that experience? What can I do now that I never could before? What are my 3 strengths, or what's my best day and why? Any learning through reviews and debriefs. And then at some point, I do recommend what's your next goal, which doesn't have to be massive. And I'm not trying to get people addicted to ticking off the list, but a bit of a purposeful look ahead about, what in the future will I now be aiming towards? And it could be a very different goal, of course. So for Johnny Wilkinson, he went from international, incredible, brilliant rugby player. Then he had another journey, didn't he, which was probably an unwanted one, the mental health stuff. But now he's, I guess, redefined as an expert in that sort of stuff and be able to support and help others, which maybe is a greater, better thing than what he did before. But if you can be slightly prepared for that ending and think ahead a bit and accept that you're going to have a bit of a down, but then actually process it, think about it, celebrate it, and plan a bit of something else that will happen next, whatever that is.
You mentioned addiction there. Would you say you're addicted to the adventure?
That's why no. So I used the word user before, the addiction and user thing with social media. No, I don't like to brag, but I think I've got it about right. I'm really happy with my life. I've got a lovely balance. I think I've got a good perspective, and I know that I enjoy doing adventures. I know that it's good for me. So I will be literally going to Ukraine in 2 weeks' time and probably come back happier and more relaxed and feel better in my heart than when I left. I just know it's good for me to do these things, to get out there. So it's more going to the gym than an obsession, and I've got quite a lot of balance in my life. So no.
You mentioned again, I relate to the TED talk about the deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
Lying on your deathbed with a smile and looking back. There was a post I put out recently about, you may well know, from a guy called Les Brown, about the ghosts that are around your deathbed.
Okay.
And it's a really fascinating clip. I have to share it with you. But he says, we're the ghosts of all the dreams and ambitions and things that you wanted to do. And we was there, ready to do it with you. And you didn't do them things, and now we're just going to go to the grave with you. And he says, how many people, so ask yourself this question, how many people will be around your deathbed on that thing? And what's fascinating about talking to you and listening to your journey, and you alluded to, I guess, in your TED talk about it, there's not going to be many ghosts around your deathbed.
No, it's going to be a party, isn't it?
We all did it.
Yeah, it'll be all my old teammates and colleagues and acquaintances having a party saying, we did it.
But if you could leave one lesson, if you're on your deathbed, you could leave one lesson, what would it be?
So it wouldn't be to my younger self, because I just think life is life, and whatever happens in it, accept it, move on, enjoy it. It's hard to teach people when they're younger, because they kind of need to realise for themselves, So they have to be ready, and I feel like I'm a Yoda or something now. But it's kind of about living in the moment. So it's that presence thing, but that's really hard to teach. You have to know it and be ready for it. There is no try. So yeah, it's about being present. It's about accepting life is up and down and tough and difficult and tricky and challenging and uncertain and all that. Accept that. And just be present, so wallow in it, or to savour it, or to be present as much as possible, to have that flow, because life will happen anyway. So yeah, fully immerse, appreciate, and savour it. But you can't really teach that.
I usually always finish off with the definition of success, which you've obviously alluded to already, and then rounded up, I guess, in that element there as well. So. Paul, honestly, as I knew it would be after our brief 15 minutes in front of an audience chat, it's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm so grateful for your time and your insights. It's been absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. It's been brilliant.
Thank you for having me. Amazing. And now I'm going to dash off to the toilet.
We made it. And
we're aiming for you to be on the finishing line.
She's like saying, don't ask me another question. As they say, is a wrap.